Stephan, in trying to develop the philosophy of the arts, like we have philosophy of science or mind or religion or mathematics or educational laws, application of philosophical thinking to discern the essence of fields. Philosophy of the arts would go through various categories in terms of what art means or what is art, and in some cases not deal with the relationship between arts and theology. You, as a theologian, and from the continental tradition, have focused on aesthetics and arts in relationship to theology. So the question I want to ask you is, can the work that you've done in aesthetics and theology inform a philosophy of the arts?
If I would have to relate theology to philosophy of the arts, I would do it in the following way. Theology is about thinking the history of salvation or understanding that particular Christian view on the history of salvation. And for me, that's important when we think about the arts. How do we describe that history of salvation? Well, there's a certain narrative that there was creation, there was creativity first, and then people started to tell stories about it. So you've got the arts in creation, you've got the arts in telling stories. And these oral traditions, they became part of what we've later called Holy Scripture, the Bible. And that Scripture, these books in the Bible, have created a community, a tradition of thought, with its own richness of the human imagination, which evokes all kinds of spiritual experiences. Now, how does this inform a philosophy of the arts? Well, it adds certain categories to the philosophy of the arts, which it hasn't come up with it itself. Divine creativity, that there is transcendence, if you would like to call it like that. There's the divine at work in human imagination and human creativity. It comes with narratives, that humanity talking about itself, understanding itself, and that the imagination is very much part of it. And that these stories are stories of salvation. So theology could add a salvific aspect to a philosophy of the arts. That tradition is part of our holy texts, and that these texts have generated a whole aesthetic tradition and a richness of the imagination. So divine creativity, the human imagination and the narratives of humanity about itself, Scripture as generating a community, which is a community of salvation, and a tradition that it generates of images and creativity. All these are, I think, different concepts that could inform the philosophy of the arts.
So if one had a sequence of topics, 5 or 7, 10 topics in philosophy of the arts, how then would you add, what different concepts would you add as far as a totally new topic, or how would you inform some of the traditional topics? To take what you've just said, to explain that, to directly affect those philosophy of the arts.
Yes, so creativity as participation.
Okay.
Human beings as being co-creators of the whole of creation.
So that would enrich the concept of creativity. If creativity was one section of a philosophy of the art, here's 2 new ways to think about it from a theological point of view.
That by creating works of art, you become image of God. You are a co-creator of divine creativity. And the concept of tradition, not necessarily a theological concept, but in the Christian tradition, it has very specific aspects.
Yeah, but that's the whole point. That's exactly what I'm looking for. I'm looking for things that are critical in a Christian understanding of the arts, and how you take an element of that and then put it into generalized philosophy of the arts. It doesn't necessarily have to have a religious component to it, but it was developed. We saw the importance of it because it came from the religious tradition.
Yes, exactly. So tradition is the second one. Thirdly is salvation. Fyodor Dostoevsky, the Russian author, wrote, "Beauty will save the world." And so he realized, and I think it was the Christian tradition informing that statement, he realized that beauty and salvation are intertwined. Beauty is not just a formal aspect of the arts. It makes us become more human.
So what you're saying is that salvation, which is obviously central to Christian theology, certainly, gives us a sense of the importance of salvation. Now, how do you apply that to the arts? And you're saying now you're using it in a non-religious sense, but you're taking the concept of salvation. How do you save the world?
Exactly, which then gives art a critical factor. Because if we think about salvation, you look around the world that we live in, I mean, salvation is not always present, and the arts could help by criticizing our situation, showing it as it is, that, you know, we need to think towards salvation.